I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner podcast. Have you ever walked into a city or even a room and you just felt something deep inside just stir? Not anger, not annoyance, but a distress, a holy distress. Today, I want to take you to Acts chapter 17 and walk with Paul into Athens. One man, one city, one burning conviction, and show you how God uses solitary conviction to shake an entire culture. All this and more on the Rob Skinner podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is Paul in Athens. One man, one city, one burning conviction. We're going to take a look at Paul in Athens from Acts chapter 17, because what happens there isn't just ancient history. I believe it's a blueprint for spiritual courage in a modern city. Let's go ahead and read from Acts chapter 17. Starting in verse 16, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and all the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. So let me set the scene. Paul's been preaching and planting churches all over in Greece. First in Thessalonica, he gets run out of there. It's only there for about 3 weeks. Then he goes to Berea. People are much more open. They've got a noble spirit. They're really into the word. Great response in Berea. Then he comes to Athens. But when he comes to Athens, he's all by himself. Timothy and Silas are gone. He's just dropped off, essentially, in the intellectual capital of the world. There's no team with him. There's no crowd. There's no hype. There's no song leaders. There's no stage help, nothing. Just one man walking into the intellectual capital of the ancient world. Athens had a famous university. It had culture. It had ideas. It had a reputation, but spiritually, it was hollow. The Bible says Paul was greatly distressed when he saw the city full of idols. Not annoyed, not mildly concerned, not impressed, but distressed. That word matters. Paul didn't treat this like a sightseeing tour. He didn't just enjoy the food and wine. It's like, okay, I'm just going to have a little me time with, now that my boys are gone, I'm just going to just kick it, just take a little break. He didn't marvel at the architecture. He was spiritually burdened instead. And here's what gets me. Paul doesn't get distressed over the Roman occupation, which he could have. He doesn't get distressed over slavery, which was widespread. He doesn't get distressed over loose morals, which there's plenty of them. I mean, just kind of a crazy, loose moral system. All of those things were real problems. But what was it that broke his heart? It was something deeper. People didn't know God. That's what moved him. That's what stirred him. That's what activated him. That's what distressed him. And then Acts tells what Paul did. He reasoned in the synagogue. Then he went to the marketplace. Then he ended up before the philosophers of the city. And finally, they bring him to the Areopagus, basically the highest court in the land. Now, think about that progression. He starts where he's comfortable, in the synagogue among his fellow Jews. He's totally comfortable in that environment. He grew up in that environment. Then he keeps stepping more and more into discomfort until suddenly he's standing in front of the intellectual elite of the world. That does not happen by accident. That happens when someone has solitary conviction. Now, let me make this personal. I live and minister in Boston. We've been here about 6 months. Boston is a lot like Athens. It's an intellectual capital. There's tons of world-class universities. It's got a historic reputation. But spiritually, let's just be honest, we're coasting on yesterday's glory. A few hundred years ago, people here wrestled with life and death questions. They formed the Constitution based on God, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, one nation under God. They studied ancient texts, Plato's Republic. They pored over the Bible. And now the Bible gets mocked. Faith is ridiculed. And most people are consumed with a marketplace. Their degrees are not focused on the betterment of man, but instead on how they can make more money in the current marketplace. Does that sound familiar? Here's a question I want to ask you. What distresses you? Not what annoys you, not what makes you scroll angrily. What actually moves your soul? Because entire industries are built today around keeping you outraged. Every week there's a new crisis. Every week there's a new problem. It's in Tucson, or it's in Minneapolis, or it's in Iran, or it's some other place, or it's DC, a new headline, a new controversy. Distance has been removed as a barrier. And now we're overwhelmed by everyone's problems everywhere. So people live in permanent outrage mode. But here's the thing, Paul didn't let global problems paralyze him. He focused on what was right in front of him at the time, his city, his people, his moment. And that's the shift that we need. If we can channel our distress the way Paul did toward our actual world, we have a real chance of changing the wider world. I remember the World Evangelism seminar in the late 80s. There's quite a few here in Boston. And at that point, Boston was a real hub of evangelism. I was a 1 or 2 year old Christian and I went to it. I was so fired up, and they would meet in the Boston Garden, which is now the TD Garden, where the Boston Celtics now play. And it was awesome. And I remember something that just stood out to me. A bunch of MIT students at the time had created a digital display. Now, that was back when you had like LED, kind of like the old LED alarm clocks. And they had, on one side was all the births and then all the deaths. And they would just be clicking in real time. You know, they just timed it, how many births were happening at that moment and how many deaths were happening at that moment. And it was so crazy, because the whole point was to make you aware of how many people were being born into this world and how many people were departing this world. And the question was that you were left with is, do they know Christ? If they're dying, do they know Christ? And that created a sense of distress in the people who were there. And I just remember going, oh my gosh, we got to do something about this. And it was super, super effective. Of course, the technology compared to what we have today is relatively low tech, but man, it impacted me. I remember just going back to the Bay Area where I was living and just going on campus and sharing my faith. I was just so fired up. I'm like, I got to preach the word. I got to make a difference. People are dying. I got to bring the gospel to them. And that was a good distress that was created, because it focused on really what matters the most. So let me ask you again, what distresses you at work, in your classroom, in your family, in your building or your neighborhood, among your friends, that might be God tapping you on the shoulder saying, hey, here's something you should be distressed about. For me, distress changed the entire direction of my life. I became distressed over my family not knowing Christ, about my mom, my brothers and sisters. And I just decided I will pay any price to reach them. I changed occupations. I resigned from my paid ministry position. I started a new career in real estate. And I decided I'm going to plant a church in my hometown. I changed locations. I just walked away from comfort because I couldn't live with the thought that they might never hear the gospel. And that's what distress can do when it's surrendered to God. I mean, that was a good distress. I'm really glad I had that. I mean, I just felt distress, and I still feel distress. I want my family to know God. Now, here's the part I love. Let's keep going in this section. The philosophers who are listening to Paul, they call him a babbler. Okay, they just are just ripping on him. They're what we would call trolling him right there. They call him, what's this babbler talking about? And that word, it derives from birds pecking scraps off the street, like people picking up cigarettes and then smoking them. That's kind of the image. It's just like a person just putting together different ideas. It's totally derogatory. And it basically means this guy is a nobody picking up random ideas. They are mocking him. They are trolling him. They are totally dismissing him and running him down. They're laughing at him. And Paul doesn't flinch. He doesn't shut up. He doesn't quit. Why? Because Paul was living the crucified life. And I think this is a secret of his power. Remember in Galatians 2:20 when he said, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Paul had already died to reputation. He'd already died to pride. He'd been beaten. He'd been mocked. I mean, he'd gone through rough times. When he came into Philippi, remember, they threw him in jail. They beat him. He'd already gone through it. So embarrassment could not stop him at this point. Ridicule couldn't silence him. Being misunderstood didn't derail him. He embraced disgrace for Christ. He just embraced it. He just said, this is the price I'm going to pay. The apostles, remember in Acts chapter 5, they said they were glad to be counted worthy of suffering for his name when they were beaten by the religious establishment. So Paul didn't see embarrassment as a curse. He saw it as confirmation. And listen, if you want to change your city, if you want to change Boston or any other city, any other small town you live in, you're going to have to embrace embarrassment. You're going to have to live the crucified life. Disgrace, embarrassment, insults, persecution. In fact, I'd go so far as to say you need to invite it into your life and get comfortable with it. I really learned this the hard way when I lived in Japan. What held me back from learning Japanese, and people ask me this all the time, did you become fluent? I go, yeah, yes with a question mark. I did. I learned how to read. I learned how to write. I preached in Japanese. But was I like naturally fluent, like amazingly fluent? Not, I didn't get where I wanted to be. But what held me back from learning Japanese was not intelligence. I consider myself a pretty smart guy. And well, you know what it was? It was pride. I didn't want to sound stupid. I didn't want to look foolish in front of people. I didn't want to feel awkward. I was afraid to say anything until I could really say it well. So guess what? I held on to my dignity and I lost my fluency. Did I become fluent? Kinda. Pretty good. I was talking to, Lena Wooten. She's a straight shooter. She just like, you're there 10 years. You didn't speak it fluently. He's like, well, wish I could have done better. There's a spiritual lesson there. You can protect your pride or you can grow, but you usually can't do both. And so let me just close with this. Paul walks into Athens. He's mocked. He's misunderstood. He's called a babbler. And yet God uses one surrendered man to shake an entire city. That's solitary conviction. And that's what revival is made of. Not crowds, not programs, not hype, not a great music service, just disciples who are willing to be distressed, willing to be uncomfortable, willing to look foolish so Christ can live through them. If every believer did that in Boston, revival wouldn't just be a theory. It would be inevitable. And I think about churches all over the world, and I just go, what does the church need? It needs people that are willing to embrace embarrassment, who are willing to live the crucified life. And when every disciple has that, there's going to be revival. I shared that story about the evangelism seminar. There were so many people at that time. We were rough. We were unrefined. There were so many people that, had lots to change, had all sorts of issues to deal with. But there was a distress that drove people. The distress that said, hey, the number one need in this world is for people to get to know God. And that's what sparked hundreds of churches being planted all around the world. That was the fire, that distress, that directed distress. Thanks for listening today. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Let your distress become direction and step into your moment. I'm planning on going out this weekend into the common. I've already bought my packs of juicy fruit gum. I'm going to be passing those out along with invitation cards, and I'm going to get out there. It's cold. It's kind of miserable out there and snowy and sleety and slushy, but I'm going to do it because I want to make a difference with my life. I want this life to count. Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Go to robskinner.com and sign up for it, or read one of my books. I just wrote a book last fall, The 10X Christian. You can find that on my website or on amazon.com, because my goal is to inspire you to live a no regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.